Welcome to the Get Over Yourself podcast. This is Brad Kearns.
People still are thinking in terms of more is better.
Right.
And they don't understand better is better. And more is nothing more than a byproduct of better. Athletes who are doing the mobility work, athletes who are doing the nutrition. If you go look at the CrossFit Games athletes right now, you will not see any of these top 10 athletes not doing all of these things.
Hi, listeners. I am here to introduce an awesome, beautiful show with Brian MacKenzie, known as the founder of the CrossFit Endurance movement and doing his thing at his Power Speed Endurance new brand website. Incredible programming. I'm so happy to finally meet this guy in person and catch up with him. I've been fascinated with what he's been doing for many years since I picked up this amazing book that was shipped to our office. I don't know, was it 7 or 8 or 9 years ago, called Power Speed Endurance. And it was the most thorough and mind-blowing tome on athletic peak performance and training that I ever seen. I couldn't even believe it was written. Like every single page you flip to, it's just deep, amazing programming that was taking the dialogue and the approach way beyond, especially for endurance athletes, way beyond the long, flawed, and dated notion of just doing mileage and more is better. So he kind of emerged back when he came to prominence as a controversial figure because people were seeing that he was trying to, quote unquote, hack the traditional approach to endurance training and tell people that if they did a bunch of box jumps or loaded up a squat bar with weight, they could simulate what was going on at mile 20 of the marathon and power through the final 6 miles better than if they just upped their mileage like all marathon runners or triathletes seem to have been obsessed with for the past 40, 50, 60 years. Well, guess what? Now this stuff is really coming into prominence after Brian and others fighting that battle for a long time and fighting against the naysayers and the traditionalists. And now we're at a nice explosion of perspective where the comprehensive approach to athletic training with the flexibility and mobility that his sidekick, Dr. Kelly Starrett, is known for, and the explosiveness applied to endurance goals is being well validated by science. And of course, all the case studies of people that Brian has been working with and people like him that he's trained and have embraced this new paradigm. So to finally sit down with him, meet him in person was great because looking from afar, he's kind of come off as this controversial guy. And I think the media has advanced this kind of perspective. There was an Outside Magazine article back in 2013 titled Brian MacKenzie's Controversial New Approach to Marathon Training. And the subtitle says, "The mastermind behind CrossFit Endurance says the best way to train for a marathon is to run less and torture yourself more in the gym." Well, not quite that simple. In fact, that's an oversimplified approach and a gut kind of recoil that a lot of the traditional endurance athletes had when this guy came on the scene. But guess what? It's now becoming very clear that chronic cardio is not only ineffective, but can destroy your health and mess up your heart. And it's also evident that endurance athletes are deficient in many areas, including that important factor of maintaining good technique while you're fatigued. And this is something that Brian's principles are fundamental to, realizing that, look, if you're running a marathon, for example, and your low back and your hip flexors blow out at mile 20 because you've probably never trained beyond 20 miles in training, but you do have to go 26 on race day, then guess what? Any energy that you have left in your body to produce, your cardiovascular machine can still go. That energy, a lot of it is wasted because it's going into the ground instead of generating explosive, propulsive force with each stride, as you might if you were able to preserve good technique through a more balanced and complementary training program that did have these features of explosiveness and balance. And also, what's great about Brian is the recovery aspect is central to his theme. So you're not trading in high mileage for high intensity and blowing yourself out at CrossFit. And we know that the CrossFit movement has been duly criticized for the people that go in there with an overly intense approach and overtrain via CrossFit or overtrain via endurance. This is the evolved mentality of athletic training where recovery, breath work, and breath control, and the things that he's really big on now are central elements. How about cold exposure and heat exposure? You can find him on YouTube getting you all deep on that, and also at his website with little courses and easy bite-sized entry protocols so you can get into this cutting-edge stuff from a remote location with all his offerings. Wow, I've been done racing for 24 years now off the professional triathlon circuit, and I really wish I could go back in time with some of these realizations and some of these cutting-edge techniques. And what I would do, geez, you know what? I'd slow down probably even more, honoring that Maffetone method where the low-end aerobic training can produce great dividends without causing those hormonal and energy system stresses that put you into overtraining mode. I definitely would have added more varied and probably more frequent explosive efforts as advocated by Brian's work over the last couple decades, and more mobility efforts, of course, working with the bands and working with the stretch cords and working on my posture and my breathing, but most of all, more rest and recovery. So those are some of the great takeaways that you will get from this show. The importance of recovery, how that represents the next evolution in fitness breakthrough. But interestingly, we don't just hit the nuts and bolts right away. We just had a great connection, and we went off into kind of a metaphysical and philosophical direction with the show. It started because, oh man, this guy is such a trooper. He had a severe accident and neck injury only a month prior to the recording, and he rallied. He agreed to meet me anyway. He was sitting there with a big, giant smile with his neck in a neck brace. That's why his audio is perfect, because he can't freaking move his neck. He's just speaking right into the microphone for the entire show. But what a great attitude, and you could see the light and the warmth coming from him. This guy who's been positioned as the hardcore guy who's breaking the endurance concepts down. None of the sort. He's a really great, balanced, thoughtful guy. So we go off into different directions with the show, and then we take it back to some of the great practical techniques. So you'll get a whole bunch from this show. I especially love when he sprinkles in the dialogue with terms like mastery, and had the epic quote, the epic pull quote for the show, where he countered that more is better mentality by saying this maxim, which is priceless, and you'll never forget it. More is not better, better is better. Oh yeah, so have a great time, as I did, with Brian MacKenzie, and go check out his work at powerspeedendurance.com. Here we go with the show. Brian MacKenzie.
Yes.
After that wonderful introduction that I will record after the show, because you're a good guy, man, to sit here with me with your neck in a brace. I'm sorry to see it, but you got a smile on. You're recovering. You're coming back strong. Do you want to talk about it? Is it part of living life, or what happened, man?
Well, yeah, it's obviously, being in a neck brace changes things for people who are healthy, I guess.
We have the microphone positioned perfectly for Brian, yes, and you will not notice any change in his voice tone.
None.
He's fixed position.
Yeah. So I originally was playing tag with my nephews, and I was running up a ladder to jump onto a crosswalk on top of and there was a bar up top that I missed that I just didn't see. And I went directly into it with the top of my head, and it knocked me out. And then through that, I compressed the discs at C3-4, which created a spinal contusion. So it bruised my spinal cord. So not only did I go out, but when I woke up on the ground, I was paralyzed. And so I just kind of was like, oh, life just kind of changed. And, I was pretty scared at first. But
I thought you were unscared.
Well,
but this will do it to you.
That will do it. Unscared is no more or less just the idea that, it's just another term for courage, I think. It's just like, hey, like fear exists. It's a part of life. It is what it is. But instinctively, what I did was I just slowed down my breathing based on what I understand and plasticity and kind of PTSD, stuff like that, because I knew that, had I started to ramp my respiration rate up, started reacting poorly, started freaking out, I would have probably created a little bit more trauma, or a lot more trauma centered around what was going on, regardless if I was going to walk or move again or not. thankfully, within about 5 or 10 minutes, I was moving my arms. About 30 hours later, I was able to move they wanted to see if I could walk, which was like, I looked like a baby. So you've got kids, and it's like when your kids first learn to walk. That was exactly what I went through at about 30 hours or so. And then that took a day or so to kind of get better at, to where I had clearance. Then I wanted to get out of that hospital because we have our medical insurance is through Stanford. So I wanted to get down to Stanford Healthcare and talk to the surgeons down there. I talked to probably a half dozen surgeons and non-surgeons, orthos, about what I should be doing. And it all came back unanimous that I did need the surgery, and I talked to enough people to understand. So I had the surgery, anterior discectomy on June 12th with a fusion of C3-4 because the disc would just compressed enough and still there was enough, they needed to create room for the spinal cord. So I was just a walking time bomb until that happened. And so that was where I was at. And then, so here I am.
Here we are. This is a month anniversary, man.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah,
it is.
Good job.
Yeah. I'm here.
All right.
I'm happy to be doing this, walking around. I still have some numbness in my legs. I mean, a spinal cord injury like that is pretty, everything that came back from every person, every doctor that understood the MRIs was like, we usually don't see people get back up from this. So,
oh, wow.
Yeah, I'm pretty fortunate.
So you think that that acute time does matter in terms of not going into panic and not sending the message? You're sending a message up your spinal cord.
I can only go with my experience, but in what I have experienced and what I've seen with other people who do have acute trauma and do react very poorly to it, and including I've reacted poorly to stuff before. We all have, right? That creates I think that is part. And now this isn't the whole the total thing that we could be looking at within PTSD, but this is a part of what post-traumatic stress disorder is I have a traumatic experience. I hit my head. I'm now, and this happens. And if I don't deal with this appropriately, I'm never going to walk away from that situation or a similar situation without having complete fear wrapped around that or freaking out with things like that. And in dealing with trauma myself, we all deal with trauma, right? I've done enough therapy to be able to look back at childhood and understand what sort of traumas I've had and why I've behaved the way I have. So I have some background in understanding these things, but to narrow that down to an instance to where my life changed instantly and be able to go, holy crap, this is just another opportunity. This is something to kind of walk through and understand, regardless if I'm moving the same or not. I mean, it's not going to matter. It's going to be what it is. So do I want to be more of a burden, or do I want to be more of somebody that's adding to the game, right? And those are just choices. And that's responsibility. And I think that's part of this human experience.
I mean, you read and hear a lot about people that suffer misfortune, and they express these fabulous perspective where they're thankful to be alive in their debilitated state or whatever's going on. Mm-hmm. And then we compare that to the day-to-day complaining and commiserating. And the psychologists say humans like to commiserate. So if you complain about today's traffic on in the Orange and San Diego County areas, I'll come in and say, sorry, I was late, man. The traffic was horrible. Oh, that sucks. Yesterday I missed my flight. And we take that angle so much more frequently than this enlightenment that sometimes takes a whap in the head, I guess.
Yeah, and
figuratively and literally.
Totally. I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, it made me think about stuff like that, but it's like, I think that's just part of a life at this point, and where we're at with comfort and what we've created. Like, we get to be in cars, and I can drive up from Mexico to Orange County to LA in a single day, which is something that, how long ago would that have taken? A week.
if the borough wasn't too hot.
Right. Yeah. At this time of year, right? I'm like, great. We're a little bit more advanced in that, but we do find, unfortunately, I see even in myself most of all, because I have to look there first. But, and people are nothing more than reflections of myself. And that's the way I look at it anyway. Anything I'm irritated at, I know that there's a reason why I'm irritated at my own behavior to a large degree, but It's
hold up a mirror. My cousin said she's a therapist.
Yeah.
I'm like, well, wait a sec. Hold up a mirror. Hold up a mirror. And then you're all set. So
it's it, man. Yeah. It's it. If you, it all comes back to you. And I think that where we are we get comfortable in something, we have to find something to complain about because we're not really, we don't need to survive anymore. We've kind of mastered that here. So now it's like we're living in a time where we've never had less war. We've never had more healthy people. We've never had it better. Yet we complain more about everything.
Rates of depression,
here we go.
Anxiety.
Yeah. This is going to be the biggest cause of death here in 2025 or something. Is stress will be the biggest cause, and this will be mental disease will be the biggest cause of death.
That's a stat that's going to surpass eating donuts.
You got it.
Just stress.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And this is a self-inflicted time. But, go back to Yuval Noah Harari, who wrote the book Sapiens. I don't know if you read that or not. It's a phenomenal book, but it's like we're at the first time in our existence where we are self-creating disease and problem. And that I think that when you can really wrap your head around that, that's where something like this is like, this is what it's like to be healthy and have a spinal injury and recover from it. I'm bored. I want to do more than I should. You know, and I mean, I sat in that hospital and I was watching where drug addiction begins. People who just constantly are wanting their pain meds. When are they really in that much pain? And, because I understand the opioid process to a large degree, how that works, how the pain buffers out, how we're not even really, and then we're shutting down more things. And then what chronic pain actually is. Chronic pain is nothing more than basically a mental disorder to a large degree. We're just telling ourselves we're in more pain. And it's kind of like a phantom limb syndrome which is fascinating, but this is where we get in this chronic stage of something and we're dedicating I'm bored or I'm just not getting up and doing anything about it. And I'm feeling sorry for myself. And I'm like, here I am. What am I complaining about?
Yeah.
I'm complaining about traffic and this guy, whatever, his daughter died or something happened terrible to him today. And how can, we change that?
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know.
I didn't get the promotion. I'm, feeling inferior in my teenage peer group. All that stuff is just those thoughts that pop in.
Yeah. Heavy
stuff, man. We're off to a heavy start.
Heavy start.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate your attitude, and you're on your way back. So I would imagine that everything will seem more special. The ordinary moments of life. Yeah. Having gone through something.
Yeah.
Yeah. I asked Lance Armstrong that question a long time ago before he got into scandal mode with Tiger Woods and all that. And I said, does having gone to hell and back, referring to his cancer treatment and that whole, brush with death, does that give you a more refreshed perspective or more appreciation for everyday life? And he goes, everyone's been to hell and back one way or the other. And it was like the greatest answer because it got me to think everyone's been to hell and back, and we have that opportunity to wake up with a smile and say, hey, I'm here. And I think when you're at your lowest is the most difficult time to accept this advice coming through you on your iPod or whatever you're listening to. But that's when you need it the most.
I couldn't agree more. I think everybody's fighting their own war. Everybody's in pain to some degree. Whatever. Everybody has the ability to take responsibility for way more than they do. And
you mean instead of make excuses or tell stories
or point the finger, right? Like, oh, you, and it's like, no,
hold the mirror up.
Fault and responsibility are two different things.
Yeah. Speaking of 2025, Deepak Chopra was on a podcast recently, and he said at our current rate of demise and collective dysfunction of society, he thinks we're going to be extinct in 30 years. And that's a smart dude right there, giving the warning out due to violence at all levels. And he called out, of course, global violence with the nations, but also relationship violence and all the other places that you can describe violence that we don't usually consider. But then in the next breath, he said, if this collective consciousness builds and finally we have the time to not go looking for food all day, we can survive, we can, think of higher concepts, maybe we have a chance to turn it around. That was his message that, we need to wake up.
Yeah.
So
I think, so when I hear something like that, it's not that I don't agree with it, but I do think that what I do think of is it's like you create a pill, right, for a disease. And you can't make everybody take that pill, and not everybody's going to take that pill, right? But, you can't tell, like we all know, moving and exercising is a very healthy thing to do. Yet, not everybody does it. Why?
And it feels good immediately as well as long-term payoff.
Right,
so why?
Right. Why? And so I get it. It's a hard thing to start doing. And then we get, but I think back to kind of where I think about this is it's like nature has a way of thinning the herd. And we, whether we like it or not, our animals are a part of this system. And although we've removed ourselves from it a lot, yes, we're now inflicting disease upon ourselves. We're doing the thing, like maybe we're sending ourselves ready to just thin the herd somehow. I mean, it's a bit of a morbid thought, but it's also like, can you save everybody? Can you help everybody? And not even Jesus knew he couldn't do that, right? I mean, like, hey, if you follow me, right? Or the Buddha, like if you're going to follow this path, you can find enlightenment. But, it's all very, I think we have our own way of it all figuring itself out at some point.
Well, I think about that example with diet and the criticism of the evolutionary style eating, where you got to go get grass-fed meat and pasture-raised eggs and organic produce, and then it becomes expensive and then literally unsustainable if everyone switches over to grass-fed and we need our cows grazing 800 acres of grass. It's not going to work. And so the population today, what is it, 7 billion or some crazy thing? That's sustained by nutrient deficient foods, just slamming them down people's mouths, even in the third world and of course in the civilized world. So it's like there's a great awakening going on, but it's only with 10% of the people. Oh, Paleo FX was a zoo. You should have seen everybody's got Vibrams on and orange glasses. It's crazy. It's such a fad. And it's like, that's wonderful to see. And there's 2,000 people walking the halls that have bought into, the message. And then, tens and hundreds of thousands to millions, whatever the ratio is, that are just still looking at the billboard, thinking that they need to go buy Fritos and a drink because of the marketing message with no other thought except for this tastes good. So, well,
it's the same concept of why did we put health on top of the shoulders of the medical community?
Right.
How did that happen? That's
power structure or something.
Yeah. But that's not fixing, that's not the direction. I mean, we've got to figure out ways of, making this all work to some degree. And, I don't know. I don't have the answers. I know that.
Well, you guys are working on it, doing good stuff.
We're working on some stuff. Yeah, for sure. We're trying to do our part. That is a fact.
What's the website with all the offerings? The simple
PowerspeedEndurance.com.
Yeah. Okay, so Power Speed Endurance. When did that book come out?
2010.
Okay, so we met in person today for the first time.
Yeah.
But in 2010, I met you because I was in the Malibu office of Primal Blueprint, and everybody ships a book to us. Yes. And there's a big stack, and I just grabbed this big black book. I'm like, what's this? Mm-hmm. And it was absolutely mind-blowing that in one book, like every page you turn to, you see these incredible insights that I'd really honestly never been exposed to, even as a lifelong athlete and an elite level triathlete. All we did was strap up and go pedal or run or swim and then get an injury and then rest and then come back and do it again. And so I was, I was blown away, man. I got to tell you that 8 years later. I think you can still buy the book on Amazon.
Yes, you can.
Yeah. So as we jump into the fitness topic, how did this CrossFit Endurance come to be?
Well, it's interesting because I used to like to get on my bike and go out and run and swim for long periods of time and
fuck up your neck doing that shit, man.
And find my inner zen and just keep going and going and going until I broke, and then started asking some questions, and people started saying some things that kind of made some sense, but I was a little resistant to. I was fortunate enough to be surrounded to have pulled enough people into my network at the time to kind of say, hey, I'd like you to work with me, or I'd like you to, help me out here, or what does this look like? And, I started toying with things, and it really became a concept of what is this quality over quantity approach? Why do we continue to be like being a professional triathlete or endurance athlete is like that? That's not even, I don't even know that that's 1% of the populace of even endurance sports, right? Because the vast majority of people doing endurance sports is so great at this point.
Yeah, 20 pros, 2,000 people on the starting line. So that's 1/10 of 1%.
There you go.
Yeah.
Right. So.
Oh no, that's 1%. Sorry.
Okay. So it's 1%, but by a large majority, I mean, you've got a lot more people out there. And then you look at ultra endurance and what's going on there. And then, whatever. There was nothing new that was going on, and people were busted up all over the place that I was looking at.
If they weren't busted up, they look terrible.
Yeah,
like cranes on the bike, or what does Kelly Starrett say? You look like you're taking a dog taking a crap on the bike.
A dog taking a crap. Like you look like a dog fucking a football. Excuse me, but it became obvious when I really started paying attention to stuff and just listening to what was happening. And by listening, I meant performance. And it was like, hey, I feel better. Oh, hey, I look better. Oh, hey, I'm performing better. Those are three variables anybody could agree on.
Besides that, you're full of shit, all that stuff.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
And that's where the heat started to come on. And I started to realize I probably had something. Like it was like, oh, I'm pissing some people off. That kind of comes with the territory. And
these two young dudes at Auburn CrossFit, what's their names? I forgot their names. They signed up and did a 50 miler with zero training.
Yeah.
Zero.
By the way, I've never advocated that. I've never.
But everyone was so pissed off. They're like, that's not fair. That's bullshit what you did. That's a disgrace to the sport of ultra running.
Yeah.
It was just the most hilarious reaction instead of like going, huh. Yeah. Anyway.
Well, I mean, an ultra marathon for most people really isn't running. It's kind of
ouch.
Well, I've done it. Like, I mean, let's be realistic. How many, like for 100 miles, if you're doing a 30-hour, let's just call it 30-hour ultra marathon, that pace is not running.
Which all the power to someone who complete 100 miles. But just
that is still doing 100 miles, and it is an extreme thing to do. That doesn't take away from that, but what I'm kind of getting at is going back to is like, hey, what are we paying attention to? How are you actually developing the level of getting there? And by the way, hey, that guy who's the marathon world record holder, what was he good at? Where did he start? Oh, weird. He was a 1,500 meter guy, or he was a miler. Oh, and he broke the world record there? Oh, weird. And then he went to the 5K. Oh, and he broke the world record there. Then he went to the 10K and almost broke the world record there. Oh, and then he went to half marathon. And this is over a career. Versus the vast majority of people were stepping into things and going, oh, I'm going to do 70 miles this week or 50 miles this week, and I'm going to start ramping it up. It's like, you don't have any business doing. You don't have the movement patterns to be doing that. You sit most of the day. Like you don't like you're not your body. And what happens when you actually do a marathon? Is it an aerobic conditioning issue, or is it actually a tissue issue? Does your tissue hurt? Are you breaking down? Like, are you in pain? Yeah, I'm in pain. Okay, so
what's the ratio? You think it's 99% people breaking down with tissue pain? I mean, the aerobic is even
this doesn't take away from the fact that yes, you're going to need to develop some sort of aerobic capacity to do an endurance event. Yeah. That is absolutely factual. But if your tissue is what's breaking down, well, there's plenty of ways to develop the tissue in specific ways for that sport without breaking you down further to develop that tissue. So you can go out and continue to run longer, or we could go and do some specific movements that are going to develop the tissue to not break down, make it stronger. And yeah, you might put on a few pounds because you put on some muscle mass, but a few pounds versus holding up and recovering and rebounding quicker and not breaking down and not being a mess. I don't know. I mean, it sounds like a win to me. It's not the only way to do it. And there's plenty of ways to go do things, but that was kind of what we stumbled on, and people were having incredible results with it across the boards. Thus it was, all right, off to the races. Let's start putting some content out on this.
Right. Do you think it's individual, whereby someone's going to respond better to a certain ratio of intensity, explosive work to pure aerobic mileage?
From what we understand from genetic testing now, yeah, certain people respond better. Some people
what's
don't.
up with that? So I got my DNA Fit test.
Yep.
And, I'm 9 years on the pro circuit, training my ass off and constantly breaking down and behind my peers in terms of what I could bounce back the next day.
Yeah.
These guys were machines, Mike Pigg, Andrew McNaughton, every day, going all day.
Yeah.
And I'd be like 2 days of that, like San Diego, the Tuesday run, the Wednesday ride. I'd go back to LA and sleep for 3 days while those guys were doing the next thing. And then I get my test here in 2016 as an old guy, and I was 56% strength power and 44% endurance.
Mm-hmm.
And it was if it's legit, I'll ask you that. That was a rude awakening, because thinking back to what I did to my body, I was fighting against those genetic attributes, and I proved it on the race course because I was better at short distance. I was even better at sprint than Olympic. I just had power going up hills, and then I go to Ironman, and it wasn't my thing mentally or physically. I just couldn't do the training. I wasn't built that way. I wish I'd known that and maybe been able to modify due to that genetic factor.
So I have some yeses and nos on this. I feel as though you can maximize, but the fact is so if we go and look at CrossFit, you look at something that took off like a rocket ship after it had been alive for probably 8 years or something, right? Like it was just kind of floundering around. Greg was running around. They were teaching seminars. It wasn't that they weren't doing great things. It was small. It was infant. But then when the masses kind of grabbed onto it, you saw it take off. And we have a couple of theories as to why it took off. One being the community, which is very simple to understand. Look at the running community, look at the cycling community, look at the triathlon community. These are things that gravitate people together, put them together, have them training together, doing things. Another component of that is that genetics thing. And if you look at the populace, only 10% of the population basically carry that endurance gene.
The true endurance gene where they just have that knack for it.
Yeah, that can just hammer. And I've got a guy who I actually have
Chrissy
worked
Wellington,
with but I've got a guy who I've worked with for over a decade. His name's Mark Matesiak. He's an ultra guy. He does bad water, finishes in the top 10 usually. He's finished in top 5, I believe, before. So he's an ultra guy, and he's actually an endurance responder. He's found that if he actually runs more than 20 miles, he doesn't have the best effect that he can. Yet he still introduces strength and conditioning, but we found that it was only 2 days a week that somebody like him could respond to something like that. And if you go look at a guy like Dan Pfaff, who's out at Altus, who's one of the greatest coaches of our time, works specifically with track athletes, but he's worked with all athletes. He'll straight up tell you there are certain athletes that respond real well to strength and conditioning. There are other athletes who it will ruin their career.
Wow.
And I've seen it happen.
Wow.
And so you have to look at what I think there are very individual responses. I think you can take somebody like you and you can learn from what's going on. And had you been listening a little more, like, hey, well, maybe if I just I go 2 days on, 1 day off, sleep, or how I'm chopping this up, I may get better responses, right? But Kelly Starrett, just so happens.
Who that mofo?
Yeah. Just so happens Kelly's kind of more of an aerobic responder as well.
Huh.
And here's a guy who went and squatted 600 pounds.
Really?
He looked at after he got his genetics done, and he's like, I've been basically a square peg trying to jam it into a round hole for the last decade. And I'm like, well, so what? You went and did some pretty big things And, he squatted 500 pounds and he deadlifted 600.
I thought he was just a businessman.
Yeah.
Well, I didn't realize he could do that stuff.
But he's also gone and he's done some endurance events and he's starting to do endurance stuff and he's starting to do these things. But it turns out, being 237 or 38 pounds and doing these things comes at a cost.
They give a special medal at the Dipsy for the guy who improved the stairs by pushing pushing the redwood further into the ground so the rainy season will survive.
And I signed him up for that race, by the way.
So brutal.
It was.
I mean, the downhills, the 140-pound runners will tell stories about the brutality of the downhills. And then you have this guy doing the work of two people.
Yes, totally. But, there are ways, I think, look, if you're really looking to maximize your potential, you're best not following a group program. You should probably be listening to your body on how that responds. And I think that's what most elite level athletes are doing, is they're listening to their bodies. I mean, my wife has 2 gold medals, phenomenal athlete. She was a rower. She was the smallest in her boat. And she always had a seat in that boat and she worked her brains out. But they would be doing 200 kilometers a week leading into the Olympics. And I mean, that's more than most marathoners are running in a week, right?
120 miles and change. Yeah.
That's crazy. In
a boat.
Yeah. And they're in a boat. They're in a race that's taken them 6 minutes, 7 minutes, right? So they'd be cracking and she'd come home after 3 training, they'd do 3 training sessions in a day sometimes, come home, be in tears, just couldn't handle it. And her mechanism for stress and overloaded was sleep. Sleep for 12 hours. She'd wake up and her vitals would be perfect. And I'd be like, what in the hell? I would be cooked for 3 days. And so she listened to her body and she would do what it needed to do. Other girls wouldn't, they would break. But Erin also, prior to meeting Kelly and myself, needed tools because she was breaking ribs and doing things because she was in poor positions and not thinking about things in terms of, I could utilize strength and conditioning and build my body up a little stronger, sit up more upright, do things a little different. I could change my nutrition a little bit and I might rebound. I might get a period. And, my period came back. And, it just so happens that most professional women athletes that I've run into that are in working sports think that losing their period is a badge of honor. And that is actually you learning that you're not functioning like an optimal human being now. You're actually not hormonally functioning positive. So we taught her and many of the women around that area, those kinds of things and how to eat and what to do to buffer the training. And, it's interesting because people aren't thinking like that totally. And, it's old school thinking that's out there and, it all changes. So.
Yeah, team sports, man, it's tough because you're obligated to be part of the program.
100%.
Yeah. And my son went through intense high school basketball experience, 4 years, practicing 3 hours a day, year round. Instead of class, you had to take the PE class, and all they did was just bang it every day. Yeah, and did quite well. But then, what was the next level that was possible? If Kelly says 25% of your workout time as an endurance athlete should be devoted to flexibility, mobility. And now people are getting their calculators out like, holy shit, you mean, wait, a 2-hour run? That's 24 minutes of, I'm backing off my mileage. That's going to be terrible. But it hasn't caught on yet.
But they don't, people still are thinking in terms of more is better. Right. And they don't understand better is better. And more is nothing more than a byproduct of better. And if you can't connect those dots, look, athletes who are doing the mobility work, athletes who are doing the nutrition, if you go look at the CrossFit Games athletes right now, you will not see any of these top 10 athletes not doing all of these things right now.
Right.
There's no way to hold up in a sport like that. There's absolutely no way. You will break because of the sheer amount of work you're doing over different modalities, right?
Right.
So you're gonna break. You have to.
That's the goal of the games, is to see who's the strongest,
right?
And doesn't break.
Yeah. And I mean, that's really turned into an endurance event, is all it is. I mean, it's a multi-day event. Sure, there is some heavy lifting in it, but the fact of the matter is it's just constant on. It's suffering. It's the ability to go and think what I have to do in order to win this workout or finish well in this, and how do I attack that? And they've got a bike this year that's showing up, and it's got clip-ins, and all these guys are like, oh my God, and I'm like, a clip-ins? What are you talking about? That's a bonus, my friend. Yeah. Like you're going to get some relief because of that, but they don't know how to do that. So there's a skill component that these guys all need to learn, right? Oh yeah, that's going to be fun.
Down the pedals, keep your pelvis flat. Yeah. Don't shake around. I have to say, I disparaged the athletes at my first site of the CrossFit Games. I'd never been, knew nothing about it. Mark Sisson took me over there, and I saw the muscle up biathlon.
Yes.
So you do 10 muscle ups, run a 200-meter circuit up the stairs, around the stadium, down the stairs. And we were right on the running course.
Yeah.
And these guys were barely moving. They were exhausted.
Oh, yeah.
And I went to Mark, I go, what's up with this, man? These guys can't even run 200 meters. What? And Mark's like, you ever done a muscle up? I'm like, no. Well, what's a muscle? Never done it. So then in the expo area, they have the rings, and you can come try a muscle up. Yeah. And there was no way I was getting up for one. And I was exhausted jumping down. I'm like, okay, much respect.
Yeah.
Respect. Yeah. So, but the endurance part, I didn't think about that, since it's a multi-day event. I mean,
it's an endurance sport.
Yeah. It's to people come back and do that stuff. Yeah. Wow.
Yep.
Yeah.
And they're smart. All these kids are doing endurance work now too. They're specific work for endurance, smart.
So with your endurance population, the people you're working with buying into this new idea, it entails a big transition in mentality to not think more is better anymore. And how does that go if someone's open to new ideas and trying something new, like getting into the gym for the first time?
I think it really it gives possibilities to somebody, right? Versus you're getting out of the monotonous, like I just need to go get my mileage in or do what I'm doing. It's giving you new opportunities and understanding your body. It's giving you opportunities and understanding how you should be moving. Oh, you're limited in a specific way. I suck at this. Oh, it turns out I can't do a muscle up, which is something that, not too long ago, most human beings could do at any point. And because you needed that sheer strength to be able to get up a tree or get up a mountain or climb something in order to get away from something, right? And sure, yeah, we're way beyond that now. But it's like, are we? Do we want to be? And I'm not saying everybody needs to learn to do a muscle up, but I think it creates more opportunity for people, and it's just another thing that you can look at in terms of doing something a little differently. And, one of the big things we talk about is mastery and learning to do something one way can make you a master in that one thing one way.
I'm good at running a really slow marathon, shuffling the last 7 miles.
Now, what's it like to run a 5K at a blistering pace? And that's kind of what we're like. My job over the last 15, 20 years has been to do something and then go back to the beginning and deconstruct and start over again with a new way of doing that or looking at it. And what we're currently
That's
doing.
That's a good quote for the show right there, man. I think you nailed that. Love that. Yeah. That's your job. We need you.
Well, we need a lot more. We need a lot more than me. But I think, thank you. But and right now, the paradigm we're in is we're looking at breathing and what breathing's doing. And now we're looking at how people are breathing, not only in performance, but in everyday life. And what does that mean? And we're now starting to understand the interconnectivity of the brain and respiration and how that is absolutely a part of your respiration is a part of your central nervous system. In fact, we believe it's the remote control. Your emotions, your pain, your muscles going to work, stress of any sort, there are dedicated respiration patterns that go off the moment those are happening on an autonomic level. So if I'm not thinking about it, if I'm unconscious about this, these are things that are happening. But if I become conscious of it, and this is what I kind of alluded to when I had the accident, was I instantly went back to training I've been doing over the last 5-6 years, right? Where I'm like, I know that if I slow the respiration rate down, I'm not going to spin myself out. I'm not going to drop. I'm not going to put myself into this more sympathetic dominant tone that I'm already probably in because I'm in a life-threatening situation. Thus, I'm giving myself more of a peripheral vision. I'm giving myself more of a tone to learn from this and understand this in a more clear, creative fashion. And that might sound a little odd in a life-threatening situation, but the fact is that is how we learn. Is you go through a very stressful situation and then you need to pull back and be able to go, oh, what was that? Oh my gosh, that made sense. It's, if you go watch the action sports community, you'll see skateboarders and, like I've worked with a lot of skateboarders and professional surfers and big wave surfers, and they just keep going and going and going. And when they're failing, and then all of a sudden, boom, they get it once. And they've calmed down, they've let go, they've repeated something enough to where they've stressed themselves out enough to where they let go. Or they show up the next day and it just happens. And these are very interesting things. If you look at sports like action sports, I mean, how much has surfing changed in the last 20 years? How much has skateboarding, snowboarding, skiing changed in the last 20 years? You can't really put statistics on what they're doing rotationally and all of these things with the tricks. You go back and look at where that started and you're going, oh my God. You go look at running and, you go look at working sports, rowing. The times aren't that different. They haven't made that big of a change. And so when we start looking at things like that, what are they doing? And obviously there's very different things at work here, but what's happening with these athletes versus the other? And so, this is all part of what we're looking at with even the brain and even respiration, breathing, how it correlates, how it works together, what we can do to help reset or give people tools to use in real time or in time of pre-training, post-training, competition, all of that, and what it can do.
Well, I'm a big speed golfer, and like the message of that sport is that it's the ultimate Zen sport because you're moving quickly and you're taking yourself out of that overly analytical mindset and all the stress that comes from hitting a bad shot and ruminating on it for the next 7 minutes and getting tense and thinking too much about your technique because you're just running up to the ball and hitting it. And the insight that participants get is they play as good or better than when they're deliberating for 4 hours with all their clubs. We're running around with a handful of clubs and hitting these crazy half shots and things like that. But it's like you tap into that zone that you're talking about where the guy that wants to do the McTwist 780 with another gainer at the end, they got to be accessing another peak performance state because it's too insane and too dangerous. But they pull it off and they continue to progress the sport. It's phenomenal.
And they look like they're playing.
Right. They're in that
speed golf.
Yeah. Usain Bolt.
Skateboarding.
Yeah. Everyone thinks he's just a clown at the starting line. And I'm looking deeper and going, okay, this dude's the fastest human that's ever been on the planet, the most consistent champion by far, not a flash in the pan. And then you read his autobiography and he's saying, yeah, I'm really lazy in training and my coach is always getting on me for bagging workouts and I like to party and dance in Jamaica. And, this is like the gospel that we're going to find out in 20 years' time, I think. And he's showing us right now that being lazy is okay. It's probably where he gets his advantage from the NCAA Division I runner who's going to do the relay also, and then he pulls his hammy and all that mindset about the endurance athletes that still have that collective mentality that they want to suffer.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think as a society, we've learned that we've forced ourselves into this thing that suffering is something we need to do. And that's an option.
Hey, man. I mean,
that's an option.
It's okay. We don't want to judge it. And if your life's super easy and you're living on the beach and you're, get food delivered to you or whatever, then go out and do the barbed wire race or sign up for a long distance event. But if you want to do it right and get all that value and that personal growth out of it, I mean, that's kind of, my message on the show, Get Over Yourself, is like, there's another route here.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. It can be probably way more fun.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think it really, we take on it becomes our being. doing these things, and it's not even our profession. This becomes our, and there's nothing wrong with it. It's your path. I mean, I was my path. I mean, I was doing triathlons. I did Ironman. I did ultra endurance. I did these things, and I took on an identity with it, and I took on this thing with it. And, it's like, is this really what I do? Is this really what am I? And I couldn't get over the fact that everybody would always be like, look, what are you running from? And I'm like, what are you talking about?
The starting line, you idiot.
Yeah. What are you talking about? And then it finally hit me one day. Oh, I'm just, for me, it was, I wasn't really getting into life. I really wasn't. And that's not life is going, for me, it wasn't just going out and doing all this, regardless of, if you're Dean Karnazes or not. Like Dean, that's what he loves to do. And he's a good friend of mine. I've spent time with him. I've paced him through Badwater. I've run with him down the coast. I've done a lot with him. I've spent time with him. That is what he does. And I think he's one of very few people who's really made that. This is what a career looks like in this, a lifetime in it. And I enjoy it. And, I get paid to do this, and I'm not the best. And that's great. That's a phenomenal thing. I don't take anything away from that. But that's Dean. And, it's like, what are we really doing? And is there another path? And is there another way to understand this? And do you want to understand it a different way? You look at things like the Bruce Lee concepts, or, you look at the things like martial arts, and it's like, there's a reason why there's a belt system, and there's, like why people are respectful to each other. And, you don't, it's like, there's a whole thing of mastery set up through these processes that a lot of our sports today, I think, really miss, and we miss opportunities on, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I used to put on a half Ironman triathlon for 10 years. And, the emails and the personal interactions I'd have on race day were mainly a massive collection of fears and anxiety and stress.
Wow.
And I realized it was part of the journey. And it's okay, because like, if you're just watching, you're bored, you're going to play on your phone for 4 hours, and then your boyfriend's going to come in, you're going to cheer for 12 seconds and go. So, it's okay to get wrapped up like that. Mm-hmm. But then I think if you get further down the line and you examine whether it's giving you a healthy payoff to your life, sometimes the answer is,
yeah. I mean, for me, it was like, is this healthy payoff, like, so that I can eat crappy food?
No shit,
right?
Man. No shit.
Literally, I watched this. I did this. I watched this today. I mean, I see all of this stuff so that I can eat like crap, so that I can, avoid this, not have to do that. Like, it was just, okay. What relationship?
Yeah. And are you okay, with failure and setbacks and performing under expectation as a growth experience?
Yeah.
I mean, I talked my son through some difficult basketball experiences, and say, hey man, you guys got your ass kicked. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Fantastic experience. Is. What? But if you're just sailing through life,
dude, that's so good.
That's tough.
I love that.
That's tough.
I love that. Failure is just so important. It's so important. And, unfortunately I don't think enough of us learned that early enough. I didn't.
I guess Tiger Woods didn't either.
No.
Right? He succeeded in every single way.
And then
until a train wreck.
Well, maybe not. Maybe this was, supposed to be the way.
That's right. Isn't
he doing well right now?
He's doing great. It's incredible, especially that, so many surgeries.
Yeah.
But if you look at that journey where, he was constantly fiddling with his swing and unsatisfied and needing to suffer and struggle and go join Navy SEALs and jump out of the plane. And it's strange because it definitely wasn't enough just to be the best golfer in the world and the best athlete of all time in many ways, in my eyes.
Yeah.
And he was tormented in certain ways. Maybe, who knows why? Maybe it was too easy, or just he didn't have the proper perspective to appreciate the journey along the way. If he's not signing autographs or smiling, and the next guy's staying for 2 hours to sign everybody's hat, maybe that's a checkpoint that, not that athletes are obligated to spend their time, but you can see these glimpses of.
Yeah, but you look at somebody like Ronaldo. I mean, I don't know if you watch soccer, but I mean, the note he just wrote to his team and the fans, and he left Real Madrid.
Wow.
Like, It was unbelievable. He thanked everybody, and like, including the president who he didn't get along with, and he didn't burn that bridge. And did you see that with LeBron? Do you see that with the players and like of today? And it's like, you just don't see that stuff. And it's like, really, you want to live your life like that? Like, I'm not even a big soccer fan anymore, and I'm not even the biggest Ronaldo fan. Like, I felt like he was kind of a little too cocky, but that note made me think like, that's a leader. Yeah. That is somebody who loves what he's doing. He really does love what he's doing. Why would he? That's the, where you're looking at somebody who wants to finish his career in LA, and it's like, yeah, I've seen a picture of Magic running through Vegas with, Madonna, Prince, Jack Nicholson, blah, 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 all these stars behind him as he's running through Vegas. And I'm like, there's one reason why people come to finish their career in LA. And, whatever. I mean, I'm speculating, and all the Laker fans are probably going to hate me at this point, but it's like, and I'm harping on somebody like LeBron, who I don't even know. And I don't, but this is part of this thing we see with, what's your process? Do you care about what you're doing?
Yeah.
Or is it just about the paycheck and how much you're making, and,
or just about winning?
Or winning.
Same sort of checkpoint for reflection.
Yeah. No, I'm seeing there's this kid who's jiu-jitsu, and he's, I'm not going to bring his name up, but he's this phenom. He's now a purple belt, and he's double gold and as blue, as a white. Like, he's going to be this big thing. And his whole thing is, I just want to win everything. And it's like, okay. What happens when that happens?
Yeah. Then what?
Yeah.
So we get these endurance athletes that are going to make a commitment to a transition, and they're going to lower their precious volume and mileage. Is this something that you can preserve more easily than we think? Your base, in other words?
I feel yes. I don't feel. I mean, I've seen it.
I've experienced it myself, and even in recent years.
Well, I mean, let's be clear. Your VO2 max isn't achieved by doing 70% of it, right? So, sure, you can. I think look. If you're training and if you're doing things, there's no reason why, if you're not consistent in a manner, that you're getting response out of it. It's just being able to figure out where that response is. What does adaptation mean? Where are you getting it? And are you willing to play around with that enough? Or do you need somebody to tell you what to do all the time? I don't think enough people get into feeling. And this was the third book I did with Dr. Andy Galpin, which was Unplugged. And this was about fitness technology and where it's headed. And everybody's so addicted to this stuff. And I use a lot of different technologies to understand stuff. But it's like, so I once had an athlete who, he kept looking down at his heart rate monitor as we were doing a run. And he's like, dude, we need to slow down. I'm going to blow up. Dude, we need to slow down. I'm going to blow up. I'm like, well, what's the number you're going to blow up at? It's like 166. And I'm like, where's your heart rate? He's like 164. And I'm like, do you think you'd be talking to me right now if you were going to blow up? And it was just this thing that went off in my head. It's like, I don't think we're connecting the dot of what that place you're supposed to be at or feeling is. And if you're doing something that's long and slow, that should be at a sustainable pace that is for long and slow. If you're doing something that's, 15 minutes, that should be at a pace you should be doing that's supposed to be for 15 minutes. Right? And what does that look like? If you're supposed to be at your lactate threshold, what does that feel like? Do you know what that feels like? And you should have markers and parameters that are set up around things like that to understand that. And sure, heart rate's one of those. Respiration rate's going to be another one. So what's happening with both of those things? And then what do you feel when you're there? You understand what that feeling is. And do you understand how long you can be there? Or when you've gone past the time that you can't? It's just interesting because I think we just start to fall off and we don't want to pay attention anymore. And we just want to go and do something and
outsource.
Totally. Yeah. Or, hey, maybe I just want to go up into the mountains and go for a hike and not have to worry about it. By all means, you should be doing that. I do. We go and hike all the time and I don't think about any of this stuff. But if I'm in the gym or I'm doing interval work, I know what I'm doing at specific ranges in order to achieve specific physiological reactions out of those. And if I'm doing my job or what I'm trying to achieve, I should be getting response out of that so that things are improving along the way. And there's no reason why you can't continue that process throughout your life.
Yeah, I guess if you have these metrics that you know what it feels like to run at 164 or to load up the bar with 180, in my case, in my hex bar, I'm up to 180 now, listeners.
All right. That's good.
But if I feel like crap on a certain day, and I know that my usual baseline sensation when I lift 6 reps of a certain weight is not happening, that's going to be an opportunity to make a decision.
Yeah. And hey, if I can't lift my baseline or I can't do my baseline, whatever that is, right? On a specific day, what is that telling me? Probably not ready to be doing that again.
Right.
I'm probably not recovered enough. And why do anabolic steroids work? Well, they shorten that recovery window.
EPO.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They shorten all that stuff up, right? And so it makes it so it's really easy. So if you're not actually getting the recovery to do it and you're not using, let's talk. I mean, that's really where we believe that the future of human performance is literally in the recovery. It's in the brain and in the recovery. That's it. We have been screwing around with everything like physical exertion and work that we could for 100 years now. And it's not really getting any more, unique. It's not really that thing's not really, it's now going to become individualized recovery protocols. What am I doing? What am I using some sort of respiration rate in order to get myself down into more of a parasympathetic tone quicker? Am I using heat? Am I using ice for another stimulus to bring me up, but drop me out? Am I, sleeping? Am I taking a nap? Am I, what fluids am I hydrated enough? All these things start to play. How many hours of sleep did I get? What was my sleep score? I had to get rid of one of those things because it was just like I was too concerned with my sleep score. And I'm like, why would I just go sleep?
Yeah, I wake up, I can tell you my sleep score because my eyes feel it, or they feel great, or they feel baggy.
Exactly. I mean, what do you feel like when you wake up in the morning? If you're not on it, like there's something going on, you know? So I really think it's in recovery. That's the future of what we're doing.
Yeah. Maffetone said to me on a video that he's obsessed with this 159 thing. He wrote a book about the 159 marathon and how it's going to be by a barefoot runner because they're better than any shoe. But he also said that it'll come with a runner who's doing less mileage and less intensity than today's top marathoners. So you're slamming 2 doors that everyone's thinking, well, they're running 140 a week now. So if they get up to 175, they'll break 2 hours. And it's an interesting way to think about it.
Well, I once heard that Jack Daniels asked a room of runners.
Jack Daniels, the exercise physiologist, noted guy who,
where he has 2 different groups of runners. He offers them up 2 different programs. One is the over 100 miles a week program, and one is and I'm getting this a little bit wrong, but one's under 40 miles a week program. Show of hands on who wants the over 100 miles a week program, and almost all the hands will go up. But you'll get the same results.
Guaranteed with the most exacting science that anyone's
if that's
done
what
on runners.
And it's like, that's the human condition.
Yeah, I think in my career, me and my peers, I think we screwed this up because we looked at it as this oversimplified base versus intensity. And should we up the intensity and go do the box jumps and the weighted bar, or do more mileage,
or even some skill development in there, right? On top, layered in there.
One-legged pedaling and things that we didn't pay attention to. Yeah. So that was the first mistake, was seeing it as this either or, and possibly it was like Maffetone says, just resting more would have been transformational.
Yeah,
and then still keep. This was Sisson's message to me when I had my best exercise, was just judge yourself by your best workout of the week. So go do that 8-hour bike ride on Tuesday, but don't worry about coming back and swimming 30 minutes on Wednesday and jogging a quick 20, and then Thursday going for 2 hours, easy spin. Because we were programmed that we want to have that satisfaction of keeping to a schedule. But it's just throw down on people when that day comes, and then go on a siesta and watch videos. And so when I literally increase my account membership at the VHS store. That's how, where I'm dating myself now.
Yeah.
That's when my performance took off.
Yes. Well, that's great. I do think though, I mean, it's like you get somebody off the couch for the first time, more is better. Only because more you're doing something, right? You're doing something for the first time. So we need to get you doing more. It's, and look, if you're a beginning triathlete or a beginning runner, yeah, more is going to be better in the beginning phases of this, but get better at it. Get better mechanics, get better, you should be sleeping better. You should be feeling better throughout the day. You should be becoming more mobile. Like, these are all things that should be happening. And if those are things that are starting to deteriorate, then you've got a problem. And it's like, I think once we're past that point of where we've done enough, it's then time to start to introduce that quality and rest to a large degree. And so that we get that rebound effect.
Well, it's like the amenorrheic female. She's headed down a road to maybe some wins and then a drop off the edge of the cliff.
Yes.
And I think we get fooled by that because we get so enthused at the start and we up our mileage and we set a PR and then another PR. And then we think we're own the world and then wonder why Debbie Potts is a podcaster up in Seattle and she did 12 Ironmans, including 6 Hawaii in 8 years or something. And then she went out for a 50-mile bike ride and made it halfway and pulled over to the curb. And she was completely broken. And she spent the last 3 or 4 years deep dive into functional medicine, just try to feel better.
Yeah.
And it just ended in a snap of the fingers. That's a pretty dramatic example, but we have attrition rates in these sports. Something's happening where you got your finisher medals up there from doing some marathon with a group training aspect like you recommend against because they're going out there and pushing everybody at the same workout, working really well for the 3% fittest people and the rest of them are getting overstressed.
Yeah, well, I mean, look at how Dave Scott's training people now. I mean,
how's he training people?
He's using this concept. He's using this very concept of more is not better. He's got athletes overhead squatting now. He's doing more interval work.
He's going keto now, man.
He's full blown in it now. Here's the other side of the spectrum is it's like, okay, I played in this world for a long time and it's like, it doesn't always work for everybody long term. There's very few people. And, Sisson can probably agree with this, that long-term ketosis is probably not the best thing for somebody who's doing a lot of intense or even long work, that can end up having detrimental effects for some people. I've seen it, but it doesn't mean it's not worked for some people. It has. And there are things that being a vegan, like that can be very awesome for a lot of athletes. But it's not, I've seen it destroy some athletes. The same goes for eating like crap or eating high carb or eating low carb or eating, medium carb or eating lots of protein or, you go look at bodybuilders. There's Ronnie Coleman. You see this in every sport. This guy was the 8-time, Mr.
Google that dude.
Yeah. And there's a documentary on him now. And it's unbelievable because the guy's fighting to walk again. And that is like, you want to take yourself to the limit. You just need to understand what the limits are,
What was he doing? Eating junk food or something?
No.
But he just overtrained himself.
You've got a 300-pound man who had 4% body fat and would train, out-train anybody. He'd be in the gym for hours a day and he was massive. And he's had to have multiple spinal surgeries and things because he's just destroyed his body. And now he's fighting to walk again. And, it's sad, but it's also like he's still got the fight in him. And he's like, I'm going to do this.
New battle.
Yeah, new battle. And I've seen all this stuff with the endurance, stuff years ago. People hated me and a lot of people did not like me because of what I was talking about. And yet
I heard your Rich Roll podcast from several years ago where you guys got into it with the warring factions of the traditional endurance training with you telling me to jump up on boxes instead of go for another 50 miler. Yeah. It was very entertaining, but it was, super thought provoking too. I'm not making light of this, but it's like, we got to see where we fit into that picture and test things out and be open-minded. And that's how you progress.
Yeah, absolutely. No, and I commend Rich. He loves what he's doing. He does great at what he's doing. And he responds well to what he's doing in that specific thing.
Right. There's that genetic, I've heard some argument, I'm not taking a position here, but a certain set of genetics will thrive on a vegan diet. I don't know what percentage it is. It could be 7 or 12 or 14%. And then the rest of the people may thrive for a year because they stop going to Burger King and Donut Land, and then they'll start to develop deficiencies like you mentioned. That's not a rip against a vegan diet. It's just an encouragement to be open-minded and explore.
I've tried vegan diet and it did not pan out. It did not go well. Now, the vegan community will probably go, well, you probably didn't do it right. It's like, well, maybe I didn't, but whatever.
Yeah. You didn't take your 27 supplements.
I've been involved in the paleo community. I've done the low carb. I've done high carb. I did high carb. I was a high carb athlete. I've done. Sponsored by
this episode. Sponsored by Goo and Gatorade. Brian's 1-2 punch for success. Power, strength, endurance, and a few sugary products.
I find it very interesting that people who are willing to go down and fight for a way of eating or training or doing, and yet have only experienced really one or two things. And I'm not harping on them. I just find it very interesting because
that's all interesting.
It is very interesting. And it's also very telling. And I'm not interested in the person who's only experienced one or two things in their lifetime and how they've done it. I'm interested in people who've actually gone out and experienced a lot of different ways of doing things and want to share that with people and want to pass that on. And we are designed biologically to literally share information. That is what every cell in our body reverberates. And I think that we, obviously genetically we can pass that on, right? But we also have the ability to pass on ideas and share things.
The evolution timeline, man, you nailed it. At 60,000 years ago, there was an extreme spike in population and survival rate. And the evolutionary biologists believe it was due to being able to pass information on better from generation to generation. So they're getting older, they're succeeding, they got their food things down, their hunting methods. But the fact that they could share more information was attributed to the spike.
100%.
Yeah, and here we are today, man, doing podcasts, YouTube. And hopefully,
social media, and
hopefully the collective consciousness will grow. Especially, my heart goes out to the endurance community, man. I loved it. It was my life, it was my identity when I was a kid. I have a lot of shows in the bank here talking about how, I had to get over myself starting as a professional athlete, thinking that this was the end all and the life or death matter. And I was so intense and competitive, and that was how I needed to be. And then you get punched in the face a few times, and you have to wake up and go, oh, okay. Oh, I was supposed to have fun during the training and the process and fight that battle on the starting line without that tension and anxiety and that chanting paddle breathing, right?
Yeah.
Instead of the deep diaphragmatic breathing.
There you go.
That Body, Mind, Sport book, John Douillard, it was published like in 1998 or something. And one of the tidbits he said was, try going out there and running with your mouth closed and breathing through your nose and pulling that deep diaphragmatic breath through the nose. Yeah. And now here we are. Hitting that hard.
Yeah. I mean, that's literally what we have all athletes doing, is understanding that concept. And I mean, you can go back and look at when Spartans were doing that. They were having their children do things like that. There are tribal communities in Africa that have, rituals where, kids are supposed to go through the desert with a glass of water in their mouth, and they're supposed to fill up that same glass at the end of it. And, there's, all of this stuff is starting to really, that information's finally been curated. I mean, dude, there was a guy who wrote a book in 1867 about this stuff, but it was called Shut Your Mouth and Save Your Life. And he literally observed over 1 million indigenous people in North and South America. And the biggest difference that he saw between the indigenous people and civilized man was that civilized man had his mouth open all the time, slept with his mouth open, did everything with his mouth open. And the indigenous folks literally would sleep with the mouth closed. They'd hunt with their mouth closed. They wouldn't talk a lot. When they did talk, they meant something to, they were doing, it was it's a very quick little interesting read. And it's not scientifically backed, but the fact is.
Now it is today.
Yeah. Today. Oh yeah. And I mean, we're about to jump into some research projects ourselves directly in the human performance world based on performance with this stuff, and to show what we've been seeing so that we're actually really validating a lot of this stuff. And we're a part of that process.
Well, shoot, yoga's kind of new, right? 3,000 or 4,000 years old.
Yeah.
And now we're getting that. Why is breathing such a central element to that?
Yep.
And getting great science with the different parts of the brain lighting up when you're into deep breathing. And
you got it.
What about the hot and cold, man? Let's finish off with some of that stuff, because I'm a recent enthusiast.
Oh,
I got on the phone with K-Star, and he gave me the full rundown. Then I played the voicemail on one of my shows about cold therapy, because he said, like, you go in there for a few minutes. If you start shivering, get the fuck out. If you're in there longer, you're just showing off, man, and all that kind of good stuff.
Yeah.
But something's besides the boost of norepinephrine and the increased oxygen in blood, there's something that you're expressing this idea a lot too, that there's something beyond that, like the focus, resilience, the peacefulness of the experience.
Yeah. We use the cold to really show people what it's like to be in those high stress situations again. If you've never really been in an ice bath where you're down to your neck, it's a shocking experience. I watched 2 kids do it today, who for the first time they wanted to, and their father was there. They stuck their arm in and they said it wasn't that cold. And so we said, all right, why don't you get in? And they got in and literally started hyperventilating instantaneously, and it changed their entire reaction, and they jumped out, right? Less than a minute, which is perfectly fine. And that's exactly what you should do. Like, you should get out if you're really freaking out. But if we could teach you how to deal with that situation in a different way, and then you were able to connect the dots into any stressful situation to be able to control that situation, that is a tool that is there for the rest of your life to a large degree. And obviously the breathing and something we're really now getting into is, some of the visual components of stuff, because you can do things with your ocular nerve is the fastest nerve to your brain. So what you see, if you can see, if you have vision, is literally the first thing that can change things. And one of the quick analogies on this is like, look, if I'm looking at a sunset, am I freaking out and stressing out? Or I'm watching a sunrise, or I'm out in nature and I'm seeing the mountains. Do you see people going, damn it, whoa, this sucks.
Can't get service out here.
No, and there's a good reason for that, and it's mathematical, and it's literally your visual system is peripheral, and I see everything, so I can see my hands out here to the side, so I'm looking out at the horizon, and I can now shift myself into more of a parasympathetic tone, or downshift myself. I'm calm. I'm signaling for my body to be calm. The light at sunset, your brain knows what that light means over the course of our history of a species. Because of what that light does, it triggers things in your body to go, time to start to calm down and go to bed. And then that light in the morning does the same thing and says, time to wake up and start the day. So for you travelers out there, those are probably 2 of the most important things you can do. But back to the cold, if I'm in the cold and I'm actually focused hyperly on something in front of me, think about being on your phone. What's going on? Oh my God, the lights. I got to type this message, like, boom, I got hit by a car because I'm not paying attention, right? And how many times does that happen a day? All the time. People are on their phones. You're distracted. You're in a highly focused state. You're sympathetic dominant, right? Then if we actually can introduce maybe some breathing stuff, and you've got some nasal breathing, because if you nasal breathe, you're actually tapping into the parasympathetic, more of the parasympathetic branch of your vagus nerve, right? And then you're actually calming the system down to some degree. Slow the breathing down. We teach people, largely it's what I like to do is, you get 10 breaths when you get in the cold. And when you first start, those 10 breaths are probably going to happen in a minute.
Right.
But if you get really good at this, it's probably going to last well over 5 minutes. And that can happen if you can really start to teach yourself how to do it, or you use specific breathing patterns, which, yoga has been using specific patterns for 4,000 or 5,000 years. And they've understood these concepts to a large degree. So just introducing respiration into something where you're freaking out, or you're, even if you're working out and you're pushing it really hard, well, what's going on with your breathing? What if you controlled your breathing a little differently? What would happen? And boom, all of a sudden you've got athletes who are like, oh, wow, I've got the different gear here. Yeah, because you're not letting yourself get out of control. And you're not going past that. And so I think the cold is a really good teacher with that. And on the flip side of that, you got the heat. And so you've got something that can really start to open things up and allow you to feel things in a different way. The heat's always been used as a spiritual tool, right? Many cultures use it for, not just, you hear about sweat lodges and deep stuff like that, but you've got all these Nordic countries that have been using it for hundreds, if not thousands of years, where you don't have actually running water in the winter up there. So you're not really bathing. So this is the only real way to do it. So it's a very cleansing process as well, right? So add breathing to that, where 70% of the toxins that are in your body are actually removed through respiration. So you could sweat all you want and think you're cleansing yourself, but it's not really that much. 30% is, you're talking sweat, spit, defecation, urination. That's all combined 30%, where respiration becomes that large detoxifier, and you can add that into part of your day, and wow, it's weird. You feel better. You want to remove your, potential to have heart disease when you're older. Get in a sauna 3 times a week. You've just dropped it 50%.
Are you tying in the breathing exercises with both cold and hot exposure as a necessary hand in hand?
Not necessary, but I think they are a hand in hand. We will teach the cold with a specific breathing. The heat, we do. It's not necessary, but it enhances it. Like holding a breath pattern for 15, 20 minutes in the sauna, can be interesting. And you start to see when your brain's getting a little too hot and things are getting too hot, and your respiration rate wants to change, yet you're not moving. And so stress is stress, man. And you really learn. You can learn a lot.
Oh my gosh, I find the cold plunge is my best opportunity to meditate, because I go in there and I take my 20 deep diaphragmatic breaths that will last of varying length. I just finish 20, and sometimes I'll just exhale and sit there for 12 seconds or something, and getting better over time. But I remember one time I went out there, because it's habitual, I do it every day, and I had a podcast going, and I'm like, I'll just listen to the podcast, and I froze in there. It was completely different than my ritual, which connected that deep breathing and that getting into that parasympathetic state where I can handle this and I'm completely focused on what's going on. Versus blah, blah, some podcast is going, and I jumped in, and I remember my hands were tingling and my feet were tingling, and I got out and turned the thing off and then started over. So that was a big insight, that you got to be prepared for what's going on in there and address it.
Big time. I think it's very important to be aware of what's going on. And like I've watched plenty of people who think that going into an ice bath for 10 minutes is a great idea. And they're for no other reason than just trying to man through 10 minutes of an ice bath. And then later that day, they're still purple or blue. And it's like, you know what hypothermia does? It means you failed. Like it means you're not going to respond to this. You're not creating an adaptive process to this. Hypothermia is not the game, but getting to that shiver response is actually a good thing. Your shiver response means that you're at that first stage and you're actually kicking on a gene that can help with a lot of stuff, strength wise. You'll see, you can see upticks. From what I understand, in testosterone through proper cold training. So there's a lot of benefits to the whole thing. Your ability to actually buffer off the cold. I went into the ocean a couple of years ago, just do some body surfing in the middle of winter here, and I didn't have my wetsuit on. And it was probably, 58 degrees or something. I was out there for 45 minutes and didn't even realize I had been out there for 45 minutes. And like, whoa, what happened? The water was cold and it didn't really affect me. I'm usually in a wetsuit this cold, and that wasn't happening.
Yeah. You condition yourself. I suppose the same for the heat exposure if you're going to go do an athletic endeavor in
100%. If you're, especially if you're an endurance athlete of any sort, heat training, I don't know why you would not be doing it, regardless of even if you're going to be in hot space or not.
Yeah. The recovery benefits and the muscle building. Rhonda Patrick's doing intensely scientific shows about this stuff where they're showing these people get fitter just from, I guess they're getting a cardiovascular response too. They're doing an aerobic workout in the sauna, literally.
Heat shock proteins. That's, you get that to happen in an endurance, workout.
Okay, man. We covered
We did it.
A pie slice of all the great stuff you got going on, but where can we go and get more into this stuff?
Powerspeedendurance.com. We've got our courses on there, Art of Breath. We've got we've got all of our stuff on breathwork, cold exposure, heat exposure, training, the methodology, the methodologies behind everything, all the principles behind all of the stuff we're doing. We've got training programs on there. All of it's there.
Right. I noticed you have a little bite-sized intro. You can get cold and hot education for $15 or something.
$15,
and you're good to go.
We got a whole slew of information on
Same
how
with the
to
breathing.
do it.
Yeah. Love it.
Yeah.
All right. Brian MacKenzie here at the nice day on the beach.
Thanks for having me, Brad.
Right on.
Yeah.
Thanks for listening, everybody. Hey, have you heard of genetic testing by now? You probably have. Yes, for the first time in history, we are able, at a simple and affordable transaction, to basically spit into a plastic tube, mail it off, and find out what your genes are all about. I love working with DNAfit.com because it's so simple. You get a wonderful infographic report, which is easy to understand. You don't have to wade through a lot of science. Yes, you're going to get a detailed printout of many, many pages talking about the interactions of the various genes that are present and expressed in your body or not, and how that affects your health. But the one-page infographic, that's when we're really talking, because you can get actionable tips and insights that you have an elevated need for vitamin D, that you have a low tolerance for alcohol or a high tolerance for caffeine or lactose or omega-3s or antioxidants. The most important and life-changing insight that I received from my DNA Fit test was that my genetics reveal a muscular makeup that's 54% power and strength and only 46% endurance. In other words, I was banging my head against the wall as an endurance athlete for years and years, training in a manner that was not optimally aligned with my genetic predispositions. Don't waste 20 years like I did not knowing what your genetics are all about when it comes to your dietary habits and exercise protocol. And because DNA Fit loves the Get Over Yourself podcast, they have created a special super duper 30% discount off of all their products just by entering the code GOY30 when you're checking out. And if you have already ordered the fun, exciting Ancestry.com package, a great gift idea, where you can get your family involved and everyone sends in their spit sample and you can get your ancestry. I'm 46% Ireland and 44% England, Western Europe. I'm a pure breed. I don't know if that's good or bad. With dogs, it's bad. Probably with humans, not great either. But I am what I am, said Popeye and I, and my sister and my brother and my mom and dad all have our fun reports to look and see all this cool stuff at Ancestry.com, so check them out. But if you did an Ancestry.com report, or if you've done a 23andMe genetic report, the new technology allows DNA Fit to pull from the same central database and produce their fitness, health, diet, exercise genetic infographic for much less cost because you've already gone through the DNA sequencing from the other sources. So check that out on DNAfit.com and leverage what you may have already done, or get started with DNA Fit and get your diet and exercise right with that awesome 30% discount, GOY30. Hey listeners, here's a wild idea. Eat good, clean, delicious, sustainably raised meat. That's why we're going to talk about Wild Idea Buffalo. 100% grass-fed and finished meat. These are animals that lived a fabulous, healthy life out there on the Great Plains of South Dakota. Look at their website, wildideabuffalo.com, and the homepage picture is going to blow your mind. These beautiful animals out grazing. And you probably know or have a basic awareness of the distinct contrast between the horrible, miserable feedlot existence of the conventionally raised animal, a grain-based diet filled with hormones, pesticides, antibiotics, and a body filled with stress hormones when they slaughter it violently, You may not want me to go deeper here, but I will anyway. This is a quote from Jared Chrisman, Primal Health Coach, who's in tight with the Wild Idea Buffalo people, introduced us. Thank you, Jared. He says, slaughterhouse animals have been taken out of their natural environment and trailered to a feedlot where they stand in their own feces eating corn grain, and in some instances, expired human food like cookies and candy, sometimes with the wrapper still on. Then, once the animals are sufficiently fattened up, they trailer them again, putting them under more stress, and they put them in chutes and kill them in mass quantities without regard to the animal's well-being. So this concept of having stress hormones running through the bloodstream, as any hunter will tell you, is bad news. If you don't get a clean shot on an animal and it suffers before it dies, you're going to have a meat that doesn't taste as good and has less nutritional value. Then we have the contrast of the natural life of the Wild Idea buffalo, whose diet is basically water, grass, and sunshine. And supporting this goal of sustainability, they call it Beyond Organic, the company's mission to let them graze on the pasture, not ruin the native lands of America, but just be in harmony with the environment. And when you taste an animal that's been sustainably raised, you will notice a difference. Even if you're a less sophisticated consumer like me, who just eats food for energy my whole life and goes out there and trains, of course, a little different now. But when I consume a pastured egg with that bright orange yolk, or when I bite into a grass-fed steak, or some buffalo burger, which is one of the greatest meals, so simple to prepare, try it yourself, give them a chance. I know you will be extremely pleased with the quality of food that you get from wildideabuffalo.com. Here's what you do. Follow Brad's instructions carefully. Visit wildideabuffalo.com and hit the order button. They have organized everything for you with beautiful pictures. Click on monthly specials, try their bundles so you get free shipping. If you're on a budget, hit the ground bison and burger section. They have all these different flavors and packages. And if you have pets and you care about them, you'll click on the pet food section and order up for those beautiful animals too. They deserve to eat healthy food instead of garbage in a bag. wildideabuffalo.com. Check it out today. Thank you for listening.